Well, hi everyone. Welcome to our speed tips with Bob and Chad. Tonight we have a special guest, Kelly Shryock, 9-time USMTS champion, owner of Skyrocket Chassis and Shryock Racing Components. How was the weekend for you guys this weekend?
Mine was good.
Mine was definitely
Kelly,
good. Yes.
Kelly
So
got to go
Kelly,
racing.
Kelly, you got to go racing. Tell us about that.
Well, that was kind of unique. For one, wearing the darn face mask all the time is something I wasn't obviously used to, and we could actually kind of weren't supposed to, but we could go up to the grandstands, and it was kind of weird. I was walking up there, and I had people say, hi, Kelly," and I didn't have a clue who half them people are with their faces covered up. So I just, "Hi, how you doing?" So that was kind of a different kind of deal. But overall, it was definitely fun to be able to get back in a race car and not knowing exactly if and when we were going to be able to get into one again. So it didn't turn out quite like we wanted, but we got out of there in one piece. We built a new car. We were kind of dragging our feet on the new car, and all of a sudden that race come about. So the car that we raced there, we were still on our powder coat rack Saturday about noon the week before, and then so we put the car together in about 5 days, 6 days. So it probably wasn't exactly right, but we still had a fun time doing it.
Well, that sounds awesome. So tell me a little bit about the controls they had and how did they, how are they policing some of that stuff and making everybody be compliant?
Well, I mean, we sat in line to get in, and it took a little while. But they were taking temperatures of some of the people there. Then we had to sign a waiver. Of course, I didn't read it. I just had to sign it. I assume it kept everybody in case we got sick or something. I could only assume what it said, that they're not liable, I'm sure. And then we got our pit passes and pretty much just watched people walk around with their masks on and kind of took it all in on a whole.
Yeah, it looked like it was quite the experience. So you've got some new things going on this year. You got a new location and you've kind of restructured the business. So tell us about the business itself. What are you doing now different from what you were last year?
Well, my partner, friend of Eric Kirschbaum, decided he was wanting to be done building race cars. So it was kind of a big challenge for us to figure out what direction we wanted to go from there. His the building we were in out on the farm there was his mom. So, we didn't have a building, and that was a big part of it. We were looking at finding a building and all, and didn't really want to move because of the scenario with my mom, and we just kind of lucked out right at the last second. This building up here in Joyce, which was 7 miles north of where we were at in Fertile, there, kind of come available. It's nothing too fancy. It needed quite a bit of work. It still needs some work done, but it seems to be fitting into what we need here, and we're pretty excited. So we not only had to kind of put together a building over the winter and then build the race cars. We sold quite a few more cars than we had in the past, and so it's been a 7 day a week, 10, 12 hour a day deal for the last 4, 5, 6 months. So we're pretty excited. We've got just a couple more cars to get done for this build season, and we're looking forward to actually being able to go race a little bit and see what we can do.
Well, that sounds awesome. Now, the shop that you have now is actually a little bigger than the place you had before, isn't it?
Our main shop is bigger, so which is pretty good, but we don't have a cold storage availability
Oh,
of what we had before. So hopefully, if we can do good, we got plenty of room here on premises to put up maybe another building to where when the project is complete, you can just roll it outside and not clog up your areas. So we're pretty excited. Hopefully, that'll work out for us, and it's kind of nice to be all on one level here, and we're definitely looking forward to going ahead in the future and see what we can do. We've added the stock car line. We hooked up with Paul B&B Chassis, and we're gonna work with him with the chassis, and very excited with that. My new partner, Jason Breeze, kind of an old friend. Bob knows, back in the day, Roger Dukeman. My dad drove for him. That's his son, Jason. He's my partner, and we got a fairly, hopefully, workable landlord on our side, which is my sister. So hopefully, if times are rough, I'd rather have her knocking on the door sometimes than a banker. We'll see, but we kind of got things laid down for us. So hopefully, we can be successful and move ahead into the next chapter of our lives here.
Well, that sounds pretty exciting. What have you got going on, Chad? What do you got new that you want to talk about tonight?
Well, we're just plugging away. We've been working on some new stuff. One of the new things we just came out with is a new hood pin locator. So when you're mounting your body and you're putting your hood on, this thing will go around the hood and then it goes over the hood pin. And then it has a hole on the top where you can transfer through instead of taking a hammer and hitting your piece of aluminum or your fiberglass. So it's just a quick little tool to slide over the hood and transfer that hood pin to the top of the hood side so you can drill it.
Well, it definitely would make the make installing a hood a lot quicker and actually more accurate. We've got one question for you, Kelly. Well, we've got a couple questions for you. First question is, do you have a go-to solution that will pick up 0.3 of a second a lap come feature time? Thank champ.
Tire softener.
There's a lot of rumors of how you get 0.3, but a go-to for 0.3 is just first few laps, fresh tires, and being prepared for the drop of the green. Trying to figure out what line you're trying to, try to judge the competition on where they're going to be running, and a lot of times making that first couple moves. I'm not the one to really usually always push it real hard, but 0.3 is a lot. But fresh tires is a part of that key at the drop of the green for sure.
Bill wants to know, he wants to invite you to come to Southern Oklahoma Speedway for Friday and Saturday night.
I just seen that come available, and I love that track down there. We used to run down there a lot, and would really love to come down there. I just don't know that we can make that happen on the shorter terms here.
Got it. Well, those of you who are out there, feel free to, for any questions here. I'll be happy to give you my opinion. Kelly can definitely give you his, and Chad's ready to talk. So whenever you guys are ready for some questions, anything else that you want to bring up, Chad?
Kelly, you had Kenny Wallace in a car last weekend, didn't you? And Tim Love's car?
Yeah, it was pretty cool to be able to work with somebody like Kenny. He's what you see on TV, and when he's talking, that's kind of Kenny. But there's the serious side of him. Don't kid you not. He's there for one reason. He wants to win races, and so it was pretty cool to have him on board. And hopefully we'll have the chance for him to be able to run his car, Tim Love's car, again a few more times in the coming season. So it's pretty cool. Kind of, you got to know them people. Sometimes it's easy to be overwhelmed with them, but they're no different than us. They like to race, and so don't we. So it was pretty fun to be a part of that for sure.
Yeah, and our old buddy Mr. Schrader was there, I see.
Yeah, Kenny's just Kenny. He's just a great guy, and it gives us hope that we can still be racing when we're his age. I mean, he's not that he's old, but he kind of is, but he's still, I'd put him up against most any race car driver out on the racetrack for sure.
Well, he's not 65 yet.
Well, he said he can draw Social Security now, so he'd be 64, I believe.
Yeah, he can draw it now, but he wouldn't get full benefits. He's got to wait 2 more years.
Yeah.
He's a year younger than I am.
He knows his number, so I'm sure he'll figure out.
I'm quite sure he's got it figured out. No doubt about that. Jeremy wants you to tell a story about loaning Jason Hughes a motor.
Boy, oh boy.
Did you loan Jason Hughes a motor at one time?
I don't know if I ever loaned. I've loaned a lot of stuff out of my trailer, Bob. I don't know that I ever loaned him an engine. I may have. I know I've loaned out engines in the past. Normally I would remember that. Can you remember where that would be at?
Yeah, Jeremy, where do you ask another question by telling us where that was if you could. Doug Blankenship wants us to come to Tennessee and run. Zach for all the three of you guys, what are the important advice for first-time racers in an IMCA sport mod? Patience and learn your race car. Just understand what the race car's telling you. Don't try to make something happen that you're not comfortable making happen, because it's going to end up costing you and somebody else some money. What would you guys recommend?
Don't over adjust. Find a good shock tuner and a good chassis builder, get a good baseline, and then stay in your own notebook and just get as many laps and as much seat time as you can, get comfortable.
Yep.
First and foremost is number one goal would be is load that thing up on the trailer in one piece. Go as fast as you're comfortable of and have fun, because that's what we're supposed to be doing, but stay within your realm of your ability and load that thing up in one piece.
And usually if you do it in that way, you'll be racing for a while, because first of all, you didn't break the bank, and then you learn. If you have to work on it every week by repairing things and bumpers and spindles and shocks and stuff like that, all of a sudden it's not going to be a whole lot of fun. Okay, we've got Troy wants to, can we talk about the left front limit chain? What adjustment you do when you're using it? Well, and we actually just did a little video here today on the left front chain. I think that left front limiter chain is something that I'm really so glad that IMCA's allowed that to happen, because we've played with that only by doing it with shocks probably for 3 or 4 years, and there's a lot of things you can do there. You just have to kind of remember what you're wanting it to do. The load chain can definitely affect side bite in the right rear. If you tighten it down, it's going to make the left rear try to traction up a little more than the right rear is, because it's not going to, when that chain stops, you got to remember you're lifting about a 70-pound weight. So if the car's rocking on the right rear quite a bit, you can tighten that chain down and somewhat help that out. It's a situation, like I said. Now, the one that we just made today is a little bit, it uses many of Chad's parts, but I like that quick adjuster. It does the same thing in a sense as your left rear chain does. It just limits motion. So, you could run a softer shock to get it to pop up easy for a short period of time. Before we were doing some real stiff rebound shocks, which that helped, but it didn't quite do the same. So it's pretty neat. I mean, and as far as like where we usually start, we start with 1 inch of drop. And when I talk about 1 inch of drop, it means when the car's sitting there at ride height, you measure your left front shock, and if it measures 17 inches, you jack the car up till it measures 18 inches and you hook your chain up. Then you've got plenty of adjustment there, whether you want to go more or less. Just kind of depends on what you're wanting to do. Anything to add to that?
Well, definitely, it's definitely a good place to start tuning with. Like you said, around that inch to inch and a quarter is kind of where we're at also. We've tried tightening down even harder than that. And, if you're carrying your left front a little bit, you're okay with that. But if your car is really doing what it's supposed to do and anti-squatting enough on the right rear and the front tires are on the ground, I do believe if everything is correct, you probably don't really need a short chain or short chock on there or a chain. But if you do chain up too much, what we found is it just, the cross member, there's not enough rebound. The right front is in compression, and we just can't keep the cross member out of the dirt. So if you tie down too much, it definitely can keep the cross member in the dirt a lot harder than a guy would want it to. And at that point, the car is just shoving all the time.
The next question, Rick wants to know, do you get more left rear drive? To get more left rear drive, do you move the pull bar to the left? And if you would do, you move it to the rear or on the frame? or both? I'll let you try that one, Kelly.
Well, in our experience has been where, depending on what you're talking about, drive. If you're talking load, overall load, as you any way you move that pull bar, it's going to influence that tire some, or it will influence that tire, but as it's going to uninfluence the other tire. So if you're moving that pull bar, say from the right to the left, yeah, you might pick up a little bit of drive off that left rear, but now you've just unloaded that right rear tire a fair amount. So I really noticed probably more than anything when I move the pull bar is it will free you up in or tighten you up in as you move. If you can keep overall load on that right rear tire, I seem to think that's a little bit better. So we're pretty well centered up to maybe within an inch to the left of center, versus being all the way to the left. I know we used to be all the way to the left, but in them days, then we would get too free in as soon as the moisture burnt off the racetrack a little bit, and then you just get too free in. So, if you kind of think about it, we're standing on the bars on the left rear by quite a bit through all the drive angles we run on the left side of the car. Really what keeps that load in that right rear tire. So pull bar, I kind of work with the pull bar and the load that the pull bar produces to keep load on the right rear tire.
And the thing, keep in mind, you still a balanced race car is a better race car overall. It might not have the greatest traction as if you had it to the left, but like Kelly said, you'll have better side bite with it more in the middle and phase two of the corners where the races are won. So you've got to be able to get in and be fast through the middle of the corner and get speed to get you off. So next question, what's the reason behind some chassis builders turning the stubs on the car? Well, that's something that way back when we originally started building Harris cars, they were straight up. And then I don't remember, I think it was actually 1999, we actually turned the stub, felt that overall the car rolled the corner maybe a little bit better. Well, then of course people tried going more. Ours was only 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch, but people started going more. Well, then of course it got a little out of hand, and then everybody went back to the square cars, and now we're starting to see the cars being with the turn stub. I just think it makes the car maybe just a little better through the middle of the corner. But I know now, Kelly, your cars are not a turn stub.
We definitely turned the stub for quite a few years, and back in our late model days, you could order cars with that or not with the turn stub. Back then we weren't really trying to carry the speed through the corner like we are in today's racing world. I think it definitely tightens the car up with the turn stub just because it's a little longer wheelbase and all. But in today's world, when we're trying to back our corner up and go through that phase one and phase two a little faster, it just seems like the square stub or the shorter wheelbase cars can rotate a little bit better through that. So, at least for what we've been playing with lately.
Sure. Jeremy came back with a question, or came back with a response to Jason Hughes, and he said that Jason was in Iowa and broke, and you didn't want him to go home without racing that weekend, so you loaned him a motor. So this would have had to have been way back when.
Way back when, it's really kind of crazy. Back in the day, if my trailers could talk in the days, we used to maybe drink a couple beers and play a lot of card games in my trailers. And, unlike in today's world, everybody's got everything so covered up and you don't want to unreveal any top racers. We would, for me, I personally help anybody with anything. And I guess loaning engines out, wasn't totally out of the question to do that.
Kelly, can you talk about, and Jeremy also wants to know, can you talk about your stock car line and how it relates to B&B?
Well, we really not changed a whole lot on the B&Bs yet. We kind of give it our own little look with the interior and such. And Paul's cars are pretty darn good. We run one last year, 30 nights and 110. it's going to be a little tough to advance his program because it's pretty darn good right now. But we're going to take a look and just try to refine things a little bit and work with Paul. And I thoroughly enjoy working with him. He's a great guy, and hopefully we can, between us, a couple of people, we can try to make them cars even better than they already are. So we're just going to take a look at the front end. We're just going to tune just a little bit different throughout the season and see if we can continue to be successful in that kind of car there. So pretty excited.
Next question. Kelly's got a question, not you, Kelly, Kelly Schmidt. On an IMCA B mod, how much does adjusting the rear spoiler change the handling of the car? Well, it's just kind of like everything. You lay it down, and it has a little better flow, so it doesn't hook the car so much. You stand it up, it could hook the car up a little bit more. Kelly, you've run with USMTS. You run some big spoiler stuff. What's your opinion?
Pretty much. I always thought there was a certain degree in that 70 to 80 degree range looked to be about the best. But now, if you look at the late model world, they're pretty much almost 90 degrees up and down. So stand that thing up as high as you can get it if you want maximum amount of downforce.
Next question. Kevin has a question. What's a good starting point for left rear drop load on a metric stock car?
Well, unfortunately, IMCA put their 2 cents into their rules, which I guess they're supposed to, but they're saying we got to run a minimum of 4.5 inches this year. So that is well beyond what we were running last year. So time will tell on where we need to be successful. But they've got that 4.5 inch rule. So with the driver in the seat, they got to be able to unhook the shock, and that shock has to extend 4.5 inches. So that pretty much gonna be our minimum that we can run for this coming season.
Gotcha. Joey Wallace wants to say hi to everybody.
Hey, Joey.
Now, Joey was in South Dakota too, wasn't he?
Joey, it's always, whenever you seen Schrader, you seen Joey, then you seen his other crew guys, but it's definitely more at home seeing Joey with Schrader for sure than any other crew chief he's ever had.
Yep, I would definitely agree. Okay, next question. BJ Carter wants to know, do you remember driving Team Jimmy's very first modified at Webster City in the early 90s?
Oh, yes. I remember a lot with Team Jimmy. He bought that car from me race ready, and because he was getting ready for, I think, Vandenberg to drive it. So I've got a lot of memories with Team Jimmy, and I remember I've told this story a few times. We was heading to Muskogee, Oklahoma. We got rained out 2 or 3 times, and Jimmy kind of sped once in a while at driving that old truck he had, pulling that Chaparral trailer. And the one was really good because it literally would. If we slowed down, that thing would catch on fire. So sure enough, the red lights come on behind us. And so we stopped, and the sheriff come up, or the cops come up, and we was like, well, you won't believe this, but we have to keep going fast otherwise to keep the flame out from under the hood. And I'm sure this cop was thinking, I've heard everything. Sure enough, we jump out. We had the system. We jump out, flip the hood, put the fire out, then take off again. Sure enough, as soon as we got that hood open and that old sheriff or cop seen them flames, he was like, okay, boys, you have a good day. So a lot of memories with So that was one that I'm sure he was thinking, yeah, okay, this is going to be good. But if you ever want to put a squirter or something on your oiling system, if you get pulled over, you might try that little trick because it worked good for us anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that'd be just what I would need. All right. Next question. Cole wants to know what the advantage of an 11-inch spring. Let's see here. The question just disappeared from me. Okay. What's the advantage of an 11-inch right rear spring instead of a 13-inch on a Wasota B mod? Well, in my opinion, Cole, the 11-inch, what you're doing is you're changing the spring table of the car, which is going to end up, making the car roll over a little bit more. In my opinion, since you guys could run a 16-inch spring, I would rather run a 16-inch left rear with a 13-inch right rear. the problem you run into with that 11-inch, or the disadvantage to it, is there's not a whole lot of travel on that spring. So sometimes you can get to that point. But what they're trying to do there is they're lowering their spring table to get more side bite on the right rear. Sean Bruce wants to know, on a rough racetrack, having trouble right front, is it good or bad to raise the ride height equally 1 inch? I'll let you take that one, Kelly.
I would think 1 inch would be a little excessive. I think if you were to, the more load you put in that right front, the more it's going to accept the load of the weight that's transferring. So in general, I still do believe a bigger spring is going to get more weight. More weight's going to create more load. More load's going to create more havoc on that right front. So, a little bit bigger spring with a little less load or a little bit less ride height, for me, is kind of the direction I try to head towards, just because if you get too much load and it won't get on the right front, then it's just going to be miserable for you too. So, a little bigger spring with a little less load number usually seems to be a better scenario for us in the rough.
And Joey wanted you to know, Kelly, that the reason he parked beside you was so he could spy on your car all night.
I tell Joey, he kind of pointed out a thing on the one car is pretty good, but well, tell him ditto. I kind of had my big eyes open also. So,
Charlie wants to know, front roll centers, left, right, or in the center?
I would say, roll centers to the left. We want to get on the right front, but we don't want to get on it too hard. So definitely to the left will control a little bit of that crash on the right front when you're trying to achieve what you're looking for. So I think it depends on how much droop you're running and how hard you're getting on that right front anyway. So it's not necessarily the static, really. It's the migration of the roll center that really is probably in today's world more important. So moving that to the left will, help ease the pain of the you might not get on it fast enough for you. You move too far to the right, it might just crash too hard on the right front. So again, that balance, like Bob said earlier, is what we're looking for.
Yeah, and the thing too is you have to remember the number that it's just a number. In today's world, it's almost just a number because, like Kelly said, it's all about the migration of it. And so, we're dealing anymore so much with dynamics of where it ends up, not necessarily where it starts at, as much as where it ends up in a dynamic fashion. So it's, but as a rule of thumb, closer to center is pretty good. Most of these guys aren't going too far to the left. Because that could cause it not to get on the right front. So balanced car, once again, a balanced race car. That's what's most important.
I think if you're looking at trying to get on a big spring, you would want it probably more to the right. If you're trying to run a soft spring setup, then you're going to want to probably move it to the left. Increasing. If you are looking to do a roll center change, putting a taller ball joint on the left upper will move it to the left a little. So, if you're thinking you want to get off the right front a little bit, you can put another half inch longer stud on that left front and move it. It will move it to the left some, and see if that helps your scenario. But understand the change, why you're wanting to make a change before you do make a change.
Andrew wants to know, in a limited late model, we run coilover kits, and the chassis builder wants a 12-inch. Now, Andrew, are you asking, he wants you to run a 12-inch spring? I'm assuming that would be the case. It's probably a question that's a little better for him to answer what his reasoning is behind that, because it all depends on where everything is located and what the rest of the car is doing. I'm quite sure there's a logical reason why. Question for Chad. Would the drop spring bucket be a good option on the stock cars?
Yeah, so putting a drop cup in the right front is going to change the spring table on the front end, which is going to help the car get on the right front. So generally I would always run a drop cup in the right front just to get it to go on the right front easier and make the car turn in better.
Gavin wants to know if there's any of us out here in the West that has any shop space and a room for rent. Michigan will be locked down till July. Boy, I'm quite sure there's probably somebody out there that could probably help you out. I would get something on Facebook and see what you can find. There's a lot of people out here. I know we get the California guys out here quite often, and they find places to stay, and would love to have you out here racing with us. I'm fairly confident that we're going to be racing pretty much everywhere here in Iowa by the end of May, if not before. So that would beat July by far. Scott is talking about tire pressure versus stagger. I tend to see most people worry more about stagger than proper tire pressure in the rear. What, in your guys' opinion, is more important, a 1/4 of an inch stagger or the correct tire pressure?
Pressure.
Yeah, I would go with tire pressure.
When Shannon was at the school in New York there, I learned more about tires than I think I've ever learned in my whole life. But he pointed out a lot how important the pressure was, for sure.
Well, and the way the tires are made, I mean, this is not a drag tire. These guys are running way too low air pressure, and you're right. It was very interesting to have Shannon at one of our schools. I wished I'd had a bigger full-size notebook like this rather than my little 2x3 that I wrote 50 pages of notes on. I was pretty impressed with what I learned about tires too, so that was pretty cool.
Maybe Kelly could tell us if he's ever felt a 1/4 inch difference be the change in a win or a loss. 1/4 inch stagger.
No, but I know if 2 or 3 extra pounds of air, I know when we
Big.
thought we were going to win, we ended up not winning at the end of the race. So, you'll find that happy medium where them tires like to run. Too much air will restrict some traction in that tire. So, keep the stagger in it where you're wanting. I believe in checking air pressure gain to know where the tires. If you let air out of the tires because you're gaining air, you get that tire too low of air. You felt tires that run low on air, they run a lot hotter than a tire that's correct on air. So, at that point, your balance is just off somewhere along the line. So, keeping the right amount of air pressure and keeping track of how much your tire gains for air pressure at the end of the night, it'll kind of teach you a little bit of where your setup is.
And the reason why a low air pressure tire will actually run warmer is because you're working the cords of the sidewall, and that's what's creating the additional heat, and it will come back to bite you long term. Kevin wants to know, when referring to building your notebook with a load stick, can you explain the process and what you are looking for?
Well, when I was talking about building a notebook a week ago or 2 weeks ago, it's once you get your car scaled and then you have your center to center distances, and then you put the stick on there and get that load at your center to center scaled. That's your initial notebook where you're going to want to start. So you know what spring it is, what it is at that center to center distance, and then you can put different springs in, put it at the center to center and get that load set for that, so you know where each spring is on the screw jack. So, I don't know, maybe Kelly can say if he has, a 500, a 550, a 600, he probably knows exactly what it's going to take to put each spring in the right front of his car. So when I was a crew chief, I went through my spring changes and had 3, 4, 5 different springs for each corner, and I'd have them all scaled, ready to go. I'd have the measurements on the chassis, what needs to be done to the screw jack to make that spring change properly. Well, the load stick lets you do that without all that extra calculation and work. And then, building that down number, Kelly, maybe you can tell them how you do it when you get your scaled center to center with the stick, and then when you take the stick and go to your compressed number and build that end result there and adjust accordingly on that down number.
So I don't probably work with my 3 or 4 inch number as much as I would think I should, but I do know I when I get my springs in that we're going to plan on running the right front, I go through them and check them at max travels, the 3rd and the 4th inch, to make sure that that 500 is definitely softer than that 525, and that 525 is definitely softer than that 550. From there, we're looking at, we do know that a 25-pound softer spring is going to create about 75 to 100 pounds less 4-inch number if you're putting it in on the same static number. So I just know that if you look at a racetrack and you normally run a 500, and you know, I use the example of, we have 2 big tracks we raced up here: Fairmont, Minnesota, banked half mile, and then Jackson was a long straightaway flat cornered half mile. Well, the one track we would run a 600 right front, the other one we'd run a 500 right front. So I know at a 100-pound spring change, our 3 to 4 inch number is somewhere the 300 to 400 pounds less number. So I just know by when I have too much of a big of a right front spring, I just know I got to go down on spring rate, and I know my 3 and 4 inch number is going to drop accordingly. Now, rough racetracks, we can build some load by preloading. We can preload it by topping a shock out and preloading our jack bolt, or we can just let the right front continue to climb in height with a soft spring to get your 3 or 4 inch load number of what you're looking for. But at that point, you got to be really careful. If that track's rough at all, at some point through its travel, when you start preloading, that Weir's load stick might tell you got the same load on a 4 inch that a 500-pound spring, and you're preloaded with a 400-pound spring. But at some point through that travel, it's still a 400-pound spring. So at that point, rough racetracks, you need to just get the soft spring out and put a bigger spring in it with the same or a little less static number. And for me, I was a lot more successful doing that than just preloading a soft spring.
Good.
So again, softer spring works really well. I just know that, you know, when you get a scenario where the right front's not turning in at all, you know, if it's a right front push, then you got to soften the spring. And I know if I go 25-pound softer spring, I know I've knocked off 75 to 100 pounds 4-inch travel number. But that's very important to check them springs on that 3 and 4 inches to make sure you are softening the spring rate within that reason realm of travel that you're working in, that we all work on that right front between 3 and 4 inches. Keep in mind, when we're talking 3 to 4 inches of shock travel, the spring's not moving that much, but the wheel travel is. The spring's moving about half of that much. So at that point, you know, anything over about 3 inches of spring travel is really all you're really working that spring.
Good questions. Or good answers. Andrew, our limited late model guy, he with his 12-inch spring, he's on the last thread in his coilover, so he's wanting to know if there's an issue going to a 14-inch spring. Well, on a coilover, it's all about where your mounting points are. I don't see the big difference between a 12-inch and a 14-inch spring. We always used to run 14-inch springs. Can you answer that one, Kelly? Do you have an opinion?
Well, my opinion would be is working with the spring companies, that spring can be overwhelmed if you get beyond, say, a 50% number. If that spring is 11 inches and you're using up a couple inches to install, and then you're traveling 2 or 3 inches, you know, that spring can get a little lazy if you're working it too hard. So a taller spring, I learned a new word. They're called soldiers. The extra winds in a spring is called a soldier. So the more soldiers you can get in that right rear spring can definitely, no question, help keep side bite in that right rear tire. So if you don't have enough winds in that spring and the spring gets overwhelmed, it's going to tend to lay on the right rear. And at that point, it's not going to do you as good as if you can put some load back in that spring, which is going to keep that tire planted into the racetrack.
Chris wants to know, how does a 20-inch, 100-pound spring on the left rear on a modified help drive?
I have not run a 20-inch. You know, really, again, depending on the height of the spring and where you're located, if you're on a coilover, like Bob said earlier, I do not believe it knows the difference between your two center to centers if you're mounting it on a coilover or a slider. The big thing with a taller spring, it's going to have the same amount of weight's going to be on that spring, whether it's a 20-inch or 11-inch spring. but your 11-inch isn't going to have a less of a chance to coil bind that 20-inch versus that 11-inch.
And the only downside too, when you get to those big tall springs like that 20-inch, it's going to have a better chance of bowing. And when a spring starts to bow, it's going to wear out quickly. And so it's not going to be consistent through its travel. Um, I'm not a huge fan of those real tall springs. I think that bow effect can make the spring inconsistent. Um, Alan, go ahead.
One more thing on that spring bow, and no question, keeping that all centered up. And Chad's kind of redone his sliders, and he's got some apparatuses to help keep that spring centered up. So if you're on the tall springs or soft springs, keeping that thing centered up, no question, is gonna be more consistent through its travel also.
Yeah, we've started building all of our spring cups with an OD grab instead of an ID grab, mainly because the OD is not affected by rate. So to change rate, you change the wire diameter and the amount of coils. So we're in the process. We got the slider cups done, we got the coilover kits done, and now we're looking at the front spring cups, just grabbing everything on the OD to keep everything lined up better through travel. And then you can put the 5-inch bearing on there also. So on a 20-inch, 100-pound spring, and that thing's compressed like 5 or 6 inches or 7 inches or whatever it ends up being, that spring is winding a lot. So having a bearing and a proper OD grab on that to keep it lined up will eliminate a lot of that bow.
Yep. Alan says, speaking of the 11-inch spring on the right rear of a stock car, what's your thoughts on the 16-inch left rear? Well, once again, if you're going to that shorter spring, the idea behind that is changing your spring table. So it's allowing that car to get over on the right side more and gain more side bite. The spring, whether it's an 11-inch 200 or a 16-inch 200, it still is 200 inches or 200 pounds per inch of travel. So there's not going to be any difference on that. It's going to be the difference between where the springs are actually located. So that's going to be the difference. Let's see, next one. Paul wants me to ask Chad, Paul Berger, ask Chad what happens when you use a 10-inch boomstick.
I don't know what a 10-inch boomstick is.
Okay, we don't know what a 10-inch boomstick is. Ty has a question on tires. With a Hoosier G60, it's a crapshoot on what the circumference of the tire is going to be. Even trying to stretch them with more air and putting them in the sun to grow is tedious, and they typically go back down to the size after sitting to the next race. How important is stagger really when you can make so many other changes, say on a sport mod, to get to do what you want the car to do as far as tight or loose? And if stagger, in your opinion, is important as a tuning aid, what, if any, results would you have by running reverse stagger on a dry slick racetrack? Well, the stagger issue is it's the old coffee cup thing. You take a coffee cup and you turn it around and you roll it across your desk, it keeps turning. So having more stagger on the right versus the left keeps turning. Now, I've heard people going to that reverse stagger. I don't see it happens a whole lot anymore because the fact that it's so much of a momentum race that we need to make sure that the car rolls the middle of the corner the best that it can be. In my opinion, you'd be better off to have a little bit more stagger and work with trail or lead to adjust the car so that the car can keep turning on its own. What's your opinion on that?
Out of control. I don't know how a little bit of stagger change. I mean, Kelly, you're a race car driver. You're sliding through the corner. I mean, these cars are half-assed out of control. I just don't know how rear stagger is that big of a change, unless you're talking about a 2 or 3 inch swing really affecting the car in initial entry when you roll into the corner and you're somewhat controlled. But once you get bent, I'm not sure how much stagger is really playing into it. What's your thoughts, Kelly?
Well, I think, stagger, depending on how straight the driver keeps it, I'd say I could probably tell between a half inch and an inch, I would say, probably an inch. We used to run a lot of trail with no stagger. Now I'm kind of tending the other way. As you get more static trail in your car to make your car turn, then what happens is you get enough static trail in it, it will continue to help it turn. But at that point, if there's that little bit of grip on the bottom of the racetrack, you put enough trail in that thing, you can't get the left rear tire down in that little bit of grip right around the bottom of the racetrack. So at that point, a squared up rear end and some stagger would let you roll the bottom and grab that little bit of grip where I'm saying if you're running, say, a half or 3/4 inch of trail, the back of the car is going to be kicked out that extra a foot and a half, 2-3 feet, to where you might not be able to get that left rear down in that little bit of grip if you need to. So I'm tending to be more square kind of guy and running more stagger so that the car is just more consistent rolling through the corner.
I would completely agree. A lot of times people will ask me, I'm at the racetrack, and they say, my car wants to hang the tail off the corner. My first question is, well, how much trail you got in that thing? Because the trail is going to actually try to hang the tire.
And it's really going to affect the traction, or when you talk traction, trail and lead, really, yeah, it's traction, but it car, so more trail in your setup, then your overall setup may be just overall just a little bit too tight.
Nick has a question. Caster gain on the right front. What's the actual effect it has on the car, and what is preferred, more or less caster gain? You've played with that a lot. Kelly, what's your opinion on that?
After these new spindles come out, the 7 or 8 degree versus the 10, 11 degree, watching the cars when they're somebody's really, you can really notice it probably more of the guy that's more inexperienced, that's really sawing on the wheel a little bit. You'll literally see that right front just jacking and dropping and jacking and dropping through the steering wheel input. So, the lesser inclination just allows the front end to steer without jacking on that front end. And for me, in today's world, when I want the car to steer, I think we can build enough mechanical grip in the car to where we don't need the back steering effect to load up and wedge the car up as much as we used to have it available. So lesser caster gain, I think, just helps the front end steer. And no question, the guys we've taken off the Pinto spindles and put them on the 3-piece spindles, it's made them a lot smoother of a race car driver by watching them.
Yeah, when you have a lot of caster gain, that jacking effect is so huge, because keep in mind, with everything that we're doing now on the left rear, trying to get hike and everything, it's loading that right front. And then all of a sudden, if you've got quite a bit of caster change as it goes through its motion, it's hard to keep that tire consistent. So, I've actually went back to the theory. I've never been a huge believer in running a lot of caster, but with these new spindles, I'd rather err a little bit more on the caster side, in which I'm saying a little bit more is 5 degrees instead of 4, because it's going to stay the same. There's going to be very little gain. So through the whole travel, the spindle and the tire does not change like it used to, and you don't have that. The guys that have all of that caster split are the ones that you're going to see the cars are kind of dancing around in the middle of the corner, because it's not sure which direction it's supposed to go. Okay. Sergio has got a question. How much chain drop on the left rear of a sport mod? Depends on how you actually measure it. Like on our GRT car, we measure it from the frame, and we usually go 5 inches on that. It's a little bit more than what some people do, but it's basically the same as like a 4-link car, you're still working off the bar. And so you want what I've actually found is we run a lot of bar angle on the left rear, and what that affects is your end number. So like if we start with 28 degrees static, we tend to like to go to 45 to 48 degrees dynamic. And so then that kind of determines where you want that drop to be. Cole has a question. How long should we be running a set of springs? Well, that's an opinion question. That can be a brand question because some spring manufacturers that will tell you that you could run a certain spring forever. I know, a couple seminars ago, Kelly talked about how many nights he had on a right rear spring. I still believe in the fact about 30 nights, the way the springs are and the way cost is, because you're putting a lot of load on that right front tire. And I don't really care how great that spring is unless we're up into the cup style quality stuff. I just don't know if our stuff can handle the abuse, especially with the load numbers and everything. Marcus wants to know, how are you doing, Kelly?
Marcus Sanders?
Let's go back to Marcus' last name. Marcus Burnett.
Oh, Burnett. I'm doing great.
Thomas Wood, talking about tires and what you guys learned from the New York school, what are some of the key points you guys learned from that? Well, Chad, you said you learned an awful lot of tires, so go for it.
Well, that air pressure was the key, and the proper grinding techniques, the direction of grind, not to make smoke when you grind. Them were the major high points of it. But, he talked a lot about the stagger and how it's going to take more than a quarter or an eighth inch to feel it and that kind of thing. But, I'd say the grinding probably is something that a lot of people overlook, the direction to grind and not to hurt that sharp edge or to make the feathered edge sharp is really key, I think. Kelly could maybe talk a little bit about how to grind, but, always having that grinder go in the right direction towards the wall, right? I think.
Correct. Yep.
Grind towards the wall to take that feathered edge and make that sharp again.
Because your right rear, you would want to grind from the inside out, and your left rear, you'd want to grind from the outside in. Is that correct, Kelly?
The opposite of what you just said, Bob.
Okay.
Right rear on the beadlock side. So your outside edge is your you want your sharp edge on your outside edge. So you grind beadlock side on the right rear.
Okay.
And the inside of your left rear.
Okay. Got it.
You don't want to tear up your drive edge of your tire, which is the front, obviously. And on the left rear, it'd be on the inside, and the right rear would be on the outside.
Yeah, like Chad said, the edge towards the wall is where you want that edge at. Dylan wants to know, hey Kelly, how's my dad's and my car coming? Dylan Schultz. Can't wait to come get them. What's more effective, moving the left side wheel offset or the right height?
Right side wheels.
Then the right side.
What's more effective, moving the left side wheel offsets or the right sides?
I don't mess with the right sides a whole lot. I probably play with the left sides more than anything. So I'm going to say left sides. That drive edge on the left rear to the left front. That was part of our deal. We played with some wheel offsets there at Park, and we went a little too far, and I got way too tight. And all we did is moved an inch offset on that left rear. So,
yeah, that definitely will make a big difference how the car comes up off the corner. The left side's the same. Very seldom. The only time I'd ever even mess with the right sides is if you were on a hammered down racetrack that it rained all day and they still decided to race. Maybe sticking that right rear out another half an inch to free the car up a little bit is all. Kevin wants to know, Kelly, if the track goes slick at the end of the night and you have time to make one change, what would you change?
For me, for my car being right is I tend to drive off the right front. So just making sure that my right front load number is correct. Right front load number, when it's correct, it makes the side bite you're wanting. It makes a steer so you can get back to the throttle. It makes a miles per hour and your traction what you need off the corner. So for me, it's having, the matter of 25-pound spring change on the right front for me is the point of being a really good car to an okay car.
Next question. Jared wants to know chaining effect on the right rear on a sport mod. Chad, I'll let you re-answer that one. We talked about that the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so chaining the right rear can be a dangerous situation when that, if you're on a track that has any kind of chop or holes or rough and that right rear chain gets tight, that's when the car shoots to the right and you're generally going to get into the guy on the outside of you or the fence. So it's traction, the tighter the chain is, but you need to really pay attention and not over chain and over tighten that right rear.
Okay, we've got one more question, and then we're going to be out of time. Bobby's got a question. What is your thoughts on a progressive rate left rear spring on a 4-bar modified? I'll have to let you answer that one. I've never played with a progressive left rear spring.
I think it would be awesome if they were legal.
Are they legal in other sanctioning bodies?
Depending
I
on
know
your
Wasota kicked him out too.
Yeah, I think I don't know if maybe UMP maybe.
Yeah.
I think it would be awesome because then you could have the spring rate and then you could have your load number of what you're looking for. So you could definitely tune in a little bit better of what you were looking for.
Okay. Last question. How come some cars require a bent left lower bar on some 4-bar modifieds? I'll let you take that one, Chad.
So when the cage indexes on the 4-lane car goes forward, which goes towards that bottom bar. So as we get more bar angle, more chain droop, gets that cage to cam farther forward, the housing can tend to run into that lower bar. So it's merely bent just for clearance of the suspension cage when it goes through travel.
Okay, guys, we're going to have to come to an end. Once again, Kelly, tell everybody what your phone number is there at the shop and how they can get a hold of you.
So our new number here in Joyce, Iowa is 641-588-3130. We're pretty much around here all the time, so we hopefully look forward to everybody getting out there and racing. And I got to wish my wife, it's her birthday today, so I got to go home and do some husband chores, take care of the birthday girl. So that's my next.
Well, tell her happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday, Dawn.
Yeah.
She's like 32, I think.
I thought she was 28.
No, I think she's holding on 32 somewhere in there.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Sorry we ran out of time to get all of the questions, but come back again next week. We've got Mr. B&B himself, Paul Berger. So all you guys that have some stock car questions or whatever, next week could be a great. Oh, happy birthday there.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, girl.
32.
Yeah, 32. So, all
What
right.
was that question Paul had? 10-inch what?
I don't know what. So, I forgot what that was. Never heard of it. And then when Chad didn't know about it, I was fairly comfortable then because I'm thinking, well, I didn't know about it. That's no big deal. But Chad didn't. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for signing in.
Thank you.
And we will see you again next week.